Page 2 now, the 2016 race for the White House and the Hawkeye bullseye. Des Moines is center stage Thursday night for the final Republican debate before the caucuses. And here is the official lineup. On the main debate stage, Donald Trump, although, of course, Trump says he will not be there, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. Ben Carson is the fourth seed. Then is Chris Christie, Jeb Bush, John Kasich, and Rand Paul. Meantime, for the undercard debate, prior to the main event, Carly Fiorina, Mike Huckabee, Rick Santorum, and somehow, for some reason, Jim Gilmore made the cut.
The only force strong enough to turn America around is not me, it's not any other candidate running. It is we the people standing together with God's grace to pull this country. And stand with us, speak for us, caucus with us. If we stand together, we will win. Number two, I want to ask each of you to bring others. Commit right now to pick up the phone and call your mom. It's actually a good idea to call your mom anyway. Call your sister or your son or your next door neighbor or your college roommate and say this election matters.
If I'm elected, things are going to change. We are going to re-embrace all of the principles that made America great. We are going to apply them to the challenges of our time. And if we do what needs to be done, here's what history will say of this generation. History will say that we lived in the early years of this new century in a time of great uncertainty. But like all the generations that came before us, we did our part.
Now, the federal ethanol subsidy should be front and center for this next debate. And why are Americans paying for a product that drives up the price of food and fuel, is not good for the environment, and ruins engines and fuel systems? In other words, ethanol is a disaster, yet it is emblematic of the establishment, the Washington elite. Joining me now from New York City, United Nations correspondent for WorldNet Daily, Curtis Ellis. Curtis, you wrote a piece this week, WorldNet Daily, basically making the argument that the division in this country that we're feeling is more about the elite, if you will, versus all the rest of us. You're not going Bernie Sanders on us, are you?
No, I'm hearkening back to Sam Francis, an advisor to Pat Buchanan back in 1996. He wrote how the conservative movement sold out when it bought into globalization. We now have at the pinnacle of both parties, Democrat and Republican, and unfortunately the entire Washington establishment and the corporate media, they're all run by people who believe in the global economy. They believe in what's good for the mega corporations that don't care about America. What's good for them is what they believe in. And it has nothing to do with the United States of America. In fact, this global economy, this global elite really doesn't believe in countries anymore. They believe in open borders, that people and goods and money should just be able to move anywhere in the world as if there are no borders and no countries.
So it sounds to me like what we see often in Washington, D.C. or out of Washington, D.C., crony capitalism could possibly fit into all this. And my ethanol analogy also fits there. I mean, here's something that we are paying for. We're subsidizing these farmers. 40% of all corn grown in this country now goes to ethanol, which drives up the food prices across the board. And oh, by the way, it doesn't help the environment. It's worse for the environment. Takes 4 gallons of petroleum to make 5 gallons of ethanol, and it's ruining my engine.
That's right. It makes no sense. Look, it might make sense to make ethanol down in Brazil, where it's made out of sugar cane, and I believe it's more, energy efficient. But that's beside the point. What we have is a few large grain traders in this country, like Cargill and Archer Daniels Midland, who control the grain trade. They make money out of ethanol. They're the ones who make money. The farmers don't. You and I don't. And it ruins your engine. You're right. This is crony capitalism. The globalist elite control these large corporations that feed at the trough in Washington. They get special favors. They're at the table negotiating these crummy trade deals like the Trans-Pacific Partnership to protect their markets and cut everybody else out of the action.
Okay, so among the elite is the mainstream media, academia. I would throw in there also the courts, many judges, which, by the way, you could draw a line through all three of those and call them permeated by liberals as well. But this is bigger than just a political ideology, correct? Because it crosses borders. Even if there were borders, it crosses borders.
That's right. And fortunately, I cover the United Nations for WorldNet Daily, and the whole immigration plan that we see instituted by this government is, by our government, the U.S. government, is written at the United Nations, that people should be able to cross borders freely from Mexico City to Chicago, the same way they go from Chicago to Los Angeles. And guess who is one of the greatest underwriters of the lobby in Washington for this? It's Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah.
Here's a man who moved from Australia, where, by the way, if you try to get into Australia without a visa, they put you on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But here he is in Washington now with an American citizenship, now lobbying for us to have no borders. It's just crazy.
So in other words, this push to keep the borders unsecured is for personal gain only. And you can point to the high-tech industry of wanting the cheap labor, whether they come legally or illegally. Many industries in this country want this cheap labor for personal gain. So they don't really care about the United States of America, do they?
No, they don't. They don't care about the United States of America. They believe the nation state, of which the United States is one, is passé. It's an outdated concept from the 18th or 17th century, and it's about time we got over it. They don't pledge allegiance to one nation under God, indivisible. They pledge allegiance to the global economy. And whatever's good for the global economy is what we should be doing. But guess what? That's not what they do in Japan. That's not what they do in China. They try to build up their own countries, and they do what's in their national interest. But we're too sophisticated for that.
But it is, Curtis, what they do in the European Union. And I think if Americans want a vision of the future of this country, they can look no further to what is transpiring in the EU right now, whether it's the invasion of Muslims throughout Europe right now, or whether it's the economic situation there, which isn't so good.
That's right. Look, the European Union is founded on the principle of the free movement of people, goods, and money across borders. And that is the founding principle of this Trans-Pacific Partnership being pushed by the Obama administration. The Japanese Prime Minister said so. It's about the free movement of people, goods, and money throughout the Pacific zone. And now we see in the European Union that even beyond the borders, the external borders of the European Union are porous, and people are pouring in. And the elites in Europe are saying, let them in, they deserve to be here. It's the camp of the saints all over again.
Yeah, and the 2016 election, I think, is about the American people so far, from the way I'm reading it. Many Americans, tens of millions of Americans, saying, hey, this needs to stop. We need to, as Donald Trump would say, put America first. Curtis, thank you. Coming up next, the jailbreak in California, a complete breakdown of both local and federal law enforcement as the Daily Ledger continues.